the Nike Invincible 3 and the Asics Novablast 3, two very good performance trainers that highlight different approaches to technologies from each brand. When I say performance trainer, what do I actually mean? Well, what I'm talking about is a shoe that's a little bit more than a standard daily trainer, like a Nike Pegasus 40. Something where there's a little bit more foam, a little bit more structure to the shoe, a little bit more of everything that's geared towards a runner that's maybe a little bit more serious who is looking for a shoe to help them train for a race, as opposed to just a shoe that someone's looking to do a couple jogs in once in a while, go to the gym, and maybe go to the store afterwards. It's not that you can't do that in a performance trainer, they're just not really geared towards that. The best place to start to look at the similarities between these two shoes, but also the differences, is in the specs. So starting with the Nike Invincible 3, we have 40 mil of foam in the heel, 31 mil in the forefoot with a 9 mil drop. Shoe weighs in at 10.6 ounces or 300 grams in the standard US men's size 9 reference size that everyone uses, making the Invincible 3 honestly a bit of a heavy shoe, though on foot it does not feel that heavy. The Invincible 3 has a full ZoomX midsole plus a heel clip, we'll talk about that a bit more later in this video, and a modern rocker geometry, which is something Nike has had in the Infinity React series for quite some time, and it really just works in this shoe with the cushiness and the bounce of ZoomX foam, rolling you forward, heel to toe, very smooth, very nice. Moving to the Asics Novablast 3, this is where things get a little tricky because Asics measures their shoes, some of their shoes, from a different perspective than standard. So according to Asics, the Novablast 3 has 31 mil of foam in the heel with 23 mil in the forefoot, giving you an 8 mil drop. Now, there's no way. That would actually put this shoe, from a geometry standpoint, very similar to a Nike Streakfly, which it's not. Now, I realize that the midsole foam has a lot of sidewalls and it is built up around the foot, but there's no way that shoe is that little of foam. It actually makes it about the same as a Nike Pegasus. It's just, there's no way. According to runningwarehouse.com, their specs for this shoe are 41 mil in the heel with 33 mil in the forefoot. That feels honestly a little bit high. I would think that this shoe is probably somewhere between those two numbers, probably around 38 in the heel and probably around 30 in the forefoot, give or take. But it does have an 8 mil drop. The thing that I think everyone can agree on is that it's 8.7 ounces or 247 grams, again, in the US men's size 9 reference size, making the Novablast 3 really lightweight for as much shoe as you have there. And you feel that. The shoe feels lightweight, and in fact, every time I pick it up, I'm shocked how lightweight it actually is. We have FF Blast Plus foam throughout the midsole, and it has a modern rocker geometry similar to the Invincible 3, but the difference here now is that it has a much more extreme toe spring that really pushes you off the toe. That is a pretty standard feature across most of Asics' performance shoes at this point, and I think this fits in there very nicely against, everything else in the Asics line. Now, both of these shoes are trainers, so they are fairly substantial shoes. There's a lot of shoe here. There's substantial uppers. These are shoes that are meant to be the bulk of your weekly mileage. So we're not talking about min-maxing the most lightest upper with the thinnest midsole, the thickest stack with the carbon plate. None of that. These shoes are both fairly substantial. So starting with the Invincible, we actually have what I think is one of Nike's best uppers of 2023, but it's a strange upper because Nike calls this Flyknit, but it's unlike any Flyknit I've ever run in from Nike, and I've run in a lot of Flyknit from Nike. It actually feels like it's a coated material. Now, this shoe has well over 100 miles on it, approaching probably 150 miles at this point. And when this upper is fresh out of the box, it's very stiff. And I think that contributed a lot to some of the heel slip issues that some people were feeling. If you want to get much more about that, I talk a lot about it in my 50-mile review of this shoe. There'll be a link in the description if you want to go check that out. But over all of the miles I put in this shoe, the upper has loosened up. It's not quite as stiff, so when you're actually toeing off, nothing is sort of pulling at your foot. And like I said, overall, I think this is one of Nike's best uppers, and it's very durable. I mean, it's again, we're approaching 150 miles on this shoe, and the upper looks like new, frankly. Now, on foot, this shoe runs much smaller than it is. And I said that in the specs, but it's strange. This is one of those odd shoes that feels like a racing flat, but there's a lot of shoe here. I mean, it obviously is not a racing flat, but sometimes when you're in the groove and you're running in this shoe, it does not feel much bigger on foot than, say, a Nike Streakfly or even a Nike Pegasus. It's very strange because, again, it's a very wide platform and there's a lot of foam here, but the weight and the size of the shoe, they just sort of disappear on foot, which is, I think, one of the attributes of this shoe that I really love about it. Now, moving on to the Asics Novablast 3, this shoe always has felt large to me. It's not heavy, it's a very lightweight shoe, but it just looks big, feels big on the foot, and even when I've seen myself in running footage with this shoe on my foot, it just looks really big. Now, both of these shoes are size 9. They're the same shoe, same size, but this one just feels bigger. I don't know why. Maybe it's the color. I don't know what it is. When you're running in this shoe feels oddly more substantial. And I don't quite know why. It's not that it's a bad thing. And again, it's not that it's a heavy shoe. It just feels like it's much more substantial. We have an engineered mesh on the upper of the shoe. I think this is a beautiful upper, and frankly, this feels more like Flyknit than the Flyknit on this shoe. Moving to the heel, this is a heel. There's so much padding in here, and there's such a rigid heel cup and heel counter in this shoe. I don't think I've heard anyone talk about any heel slip issues in this shoe, and I honestly can't imagine any heel shape having issues in this shoe. But overall, it's a soft upper. It feels nice on the foot. I wouldn't call either one of these shoes breathable. They're not very breathable. Again, they're meant to be workhorses and they're meant to actually put in a ton of miles. So they're trying to engineer durability into these shoes and not ultra lightweight. Nike has leaned in really heavily in making ZoomX work for racing, training, and really everything in between. Where Asics is really leaning into having a training foam and then their racing foam. Two different approaches. I think there's pros and cons to each. I'll talk about that in my verdict in the next section, but I think it works well for Asics and I think it works well for Nike. Now, another key difference between these two shoes, and this is something that I don't love in the Nike, is that Nike uses this heel clip, and you can see it right here. It's this other piece of material. It's a TPU or silicone or Pebax material that's meant to stabilize the heel because there is so much foam here, and you can see it on the lateral side, the medial side. There is a ton of foam in this shoe, which means when you're heel striking and landing in this shoe, it's a very soft, unstable feeling. And that's something that this category of shoe, a max cushion shoe, which is what this was traditionally, always had. So Nike's solution is to put this other piece of rigid material around the heel, a heel clip to stabilize the heel. Now, Nike's had that in the Infinity Rack series. They now have it in this shoe. It's always been present in the Invincible series, but I just never have loved it. The problem I run into is if I spend a lot of time running in this shoe, the Invincible 3, and I mean more than 50% of my runs on a week or doing that for over maybe a month, over like a 4-week period, I start to get ankle soreness. And I had the same problem in the Infinity React series, and I never have gotten that in any other shoe. So this heel clip, it's not injuring me, but it's causing me to either use or not use some muscles that I would use in a shoe that doesn't have the heel clip. And I don't love that. Honestly, it's one thing that keeps me from running more in this shoe is that it does have the heel clip. Asics has the same problem to solve, but I think Asics' solution to the problem is a much better solution. And what they're doing, and you can really see it in this shoe, is they really build up the heel with the foam and really try to stabilize and build sidewalls up around over the heel. So the heel of this shoe is 100% foam. There is no plate or clip or thing wrapping around in this heel. This is all foam. Now the Novablast 2 did have a little plate under the heel, but that didn't carry over to the Novablast 3. There is no little plate under the heel in this. This is all foam. I actually think this is a much better solution because I have run a lot in this shoe as well. Maybe not as much as the Invincible or the Infinity Reacts combined, but I've never had any sort of ankle soreness or anything like what I would get in this shoe if I run too much in it. And I attribute that to this sort of more structural sculpting of foam to stabilize the heel. And I think it does a much better job at stabilizing the heel. But here is where the technological difference really comes in, is that I think Asics can sculpt this foam around the heel because FF Blast Plus foam, while it is bouncy, it is soft. There's more structure to this foam than there is in Zoom X. I don't think Nike could sculpt the foam around the heel in the same way with Zoom X because I think Zoom X is just too soft. Now they could change the durometer of this foam and make it a stiffer foam, but then you're going to lose the feel of the foam. So that's why Nike uses the heel clip and Asics uses this sort of very built up heel. So what's the verdict here? Which one of these do I like more? Well, there is a clear-cut winner for me in that, and that really is the Nike Invincible 3. And what makes this shoe the winner to me is the Zoom X foam. The Zoom X foam is it's remarkable. I cannot comment how good Zoom X foam is. The resiliency of this foam, meaning how fast it springs back once it's impacted. I have a whole video that goes in depth on super foams and what is foam resiliency. There'll be a link in the description if you're interested in that. But Zoom X foam is just, it's what I race in. And it's what I want to train in, especially if I'm using a shoe like this to do those longer runs in a marathon build to, build the feel for the foam because I'm going to be racing in this foam. I like training in the same foam that I'm racing in, at least for those longer runs. Now, obviously, I want to mix another foam in there. I run in React, I run in some other shoes, but for a shoe that I'm primarily going to be using for long runs, to be the same foam as my race shoe, that I really love. And that's why I picked this shoe. I also find it fits me better. I'm a Nike guy. Nike shoes just kind of fit better. But the real reason I picked this shoe over the Asics Novablast is because of Zoom X. Now, on the Novablast, I've had some great miles in this shoe. I've had some horrible miles in this shoe. And the foam has been sort of the center of all of that. Initially, it was too stiff. Then it started to feel really bouncy and great. And then it got too squishy towards the end of me really using this shoe after about 100 miles. And again, I talk a lot about this in my 100-mile review of this shoe, link in the description. Now, this is where I think this shoe falls down a little. And this is, I think, where Asics maybe hasn't had the best approach with their training shoes. Like I said, they're using a training foam. FF Blast Plus is a training foam. And when you're really pushing on this shoe, like you're doing like a fartlek where maybe you're doing some marathon pace or maybe you're doing a low threshold pace. Again, neither one of these shoes is a great tempo or a threshold shoe, but for a long run shoe, I would expect to be able to do that in that. FF Blast falls down a little bit there because it does get too squishy. It doesn't have the same resiliency as Zoom X does. And that's where this shoe really limits its use case for me, is because when I'm really pushing on a longer run, the foam starts to break down. For shorter daily runs, shorter runs, just picking a shoe up and going out for an easy run, this is a great foam. You'll have absolutely no problems with it. But if you're trying to really push it in training like you would in a build for a marathon or a half marathon, this shoe will begin to let you down because FF Blast Plus is just not their top end foam. Thank you for making it to the end of the video. If you're new here, subscribe. You'll see more content like this pop up in your feed. If not, drop a like on this video because it helps this channel continue to grow. And for that, I'm always grateful. And with that, I'll see you in the next one.